We are set to go.
Okay. Welcome from the University of San Francisco School of Law to this afternoon's latest installment in our discussion webinar series. And today we're going to talk about immigration law at the University of San Francisco School of Law with Professor Bill On Hing, who is a professor of law, director of the Immigration and Deportation Defense Clinic, and a Dean's Circle Scholar, among other things. We have more than LLM alums in more than 100 countries throughout the world. And they come here to study in our LLM programs that we have on international transactions and comparative law and intellectual property and technology law here at the law school. My areas of specialization is in international human rights law and gender and development issues. And I've been here at USF for 16 years now. And my work has consisted of teaching, doing trainings, being a consultant at the United Nations, having leadership positions in nonprofit organizations here in the US and globally, and being a research scholar in Oslo, Norway for 5 years. But this afternoon, we're going to talk about another aspect of our program here, immigration law at the law school. A number of our students come from around the world to focus in on that area of law in terms of their area of specialization. A number of them have done this work back in their home countries, and they come here to specialize that and to learn more from our professors and the opportunities that we afford them here. So we have, I'm going to let Professor Hing introduce himself briefly right now and talk about his background, how he became interested in the topic, his professional background. And so we're going to start with that, Professor Hing. So please.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Yes, I actually am an alum of the University of San Francisco School of Law. I graduated many, many years ago from University of San Francisco, and I became interested in immigration law while I was in law school, volunteering and externing at something called the San Francisco Neighborhood Legal Assistance Foundation. And I volunteered there, became interested in immigration law, and I was fortunate after graduating to land a job in immigration law. And as all of you know, San Francisco is and always has been a very diverse city with people from all over the world, and practicing immigration law in the Bay Area is a wonderful place to do it and to learn from. And so that's how I ended up being an immigration lawyer, being interested in law school.
And Bill, do you want to share some of your background?
Well, I grew up in Arizona and went to college out here in the Bay Area before coming to law school. And my parents were immigrants from China. And if you look out in the Bay in San Francisco, there's something called Angel Island that's in the middle of San Francisco Bay, and you can actually take tours there. My parents had the misfortune of being detained there. My father in the early 1910s for a few months, and then my mother in 1921. And they ended up in Arizona, in a small town where they had a small grocery store, and I grew up there in a town that was, we were the only Chinese family. It was pretty much half Mexican and half white, although there were many Native American families also in the town.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so here I am in San Francisco, and I'm married and have adult children now. Right.
Including one with the same name as mine, Julianne.
That's right. My favorite daughter, Julianne.
And you can see from his background why he might be interested in social justice issues. And um, Professor Hing is an award-winning scholar. He's also known for his classroom teaching, for his community work and litigation in all of these vast areas. And we're so fortunate to have him at USF. So Professor Hing, why don't we go into just having you now do an overview of your immigration law classes and the clinics that you direct at the law school.
Happy to do that. So we have a basic immigration law class that's called Immigration Law and Policy, and it basically covers from A through Z all the different parts of the immigration laws in the United States. And it covers things like who can immigrate to the United States, what are the immigration categories, what are the hurdles to immigrating, what is the procedure. It also includes non-immigrant categories. In other words, how can you get a working visa to the United States, students, visitors visas, those types of things. And we also include in that basic class the dark side of immigration law, which is immigration enforcement, and who can be deported, and how people are arrested, and how they become and detention, and how you can apply for asylum to avoid deportation, how you might be able to apply for other relief from deportation that might be available to you, and also the what it takes to be an immigration judge and the powers of immigration judges. We have many alum actually who are immigration lawyers, and many who actually work for the government. And so that's the basic immigration law class. One thing that Julianne may not know and Olivera may not know is we're actually adding a second class next year, a classroom course called U.S. Asylum Law. So it's a seminar that we're offering is exclusively on how to obtain asylum in the United States. And it's quite complicated, actually. There's a lot of different categories. It's not just political asylum. You can qualify for asylum even if it's domestic violence, that kind of thing, gang violence, that kind of thing. So we're adding that seminar. Those courses lead to 2 immigration clinics. Our main immigration clinic is a Deportation and Defense Clinic, and it primarily involves people who have fled violence from Central America. And so we have over 500 cases, and they're children, women, men who have fled the violence in Central America and in Mexico, and we're applying for asylum from them. So those students learn how to do cases. They actually go to court and represent the clients. They help the clients prepare for their hearings and represent the clients in the hearings under the supervision primarily of another USF alum, Jacqueline Brown Scott, who graduated in 2005, and she's a premier expert nationally on asylum law. And so the students in that clinic work with both of us, but primarily with Professor Brown in the deportation clinic. We then also started another clinic, the policy clinic, a few years ago, because there was just so much overflow in the deportation clinic. I wanted to offer another opportunity. And that clinic also, we represent people from all over the world. Many of them are in detention. Many of them need appellate help. And by that, what I mean is that they've represented themselves in detention and they've lost their case and they need help appealing their cases to the Board of Immigration Appeals. And so the students in that clinic do a lot of appellate work. They also do a lot of policy work. They advocate for immigration-related legislation in Sacramento and also in Washington, D.C. We have partners around the country that we do policy advocacy work. Those students also have done a range of interesting things. They started doing immigration podcasts. So we started a podcast series. They do social media on combating the detention of children in the United States. And finally, and this is also new, the Policy Clinic entered a partnership just this semester, beginning in January. We entered a partnership with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, BAJI. It's a national organization that represents Black migrants to the United States. And so we are partnering and also doing asylum work representing Black migrants from all over the world, from Nigeria, from Cameroon, from Haiti, from Jamaica, who are applying for asylum. And the students in the Policy Clinic are helping those clients who do not live in the Bay Area. They're helping those clients virtually, but person to person, prepare for their asylum cases as well. So that's an exciting development that we engaged in beginning this semester, and it will continue actually through the summer and throughout the next school year.
And Professor Hing, one thing that we always emphasize, the LLM students at the law school also participate in these clinics.
Absolutely, we welcome LLM students. We need LLM students because of their backgrounds, their diverse backgrounds and their diverse experiences. I can think of currently one of our LLM students, Shweta Rathore, is from India. A year ago, we had a student from Italy, yeah, and then we also had Cesar from Mexico. So we welcome LLM students into the immigration law classes and also especially in the policy clinic. But like I said, we've had, Cesar was in the deportation clinic as well.
And I always like the name of the Deportation Defense Clinic, because when I talk about that on various webinars and information sessions, the name says it all about what the clinic does. And can you describe? I can remember when the laws changed with the previous administration in Washington, D.C., and you were very busy
Yes.
during that time.
Well, let me begin by saying that the University of San Francisco is a Jesuit institution that very much believes in social justice, and that aligns with Julianne's views and my views as well. The university supports us on our mission to achieve social justice, and immigrant rights and refugee rights is very much in that vein that we do the work. And unfortunately, from my perspective and the perspective of those of us who teach in the immigration and the human rights area, the prior administration really tried to close the doors to asylum seekers from all over the world, not just from Central America. They tried to close the door to Syrian refugees, to refugees from Africa, to refugees from Asia. And we really fought long and hard battles on behalf of immigrants all over the world. We went, with the help, incidentally, of some LLM students, we went to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and demanded and obtained a hearing on what the prior administration was doing in stopping legitimate asylum seekers from reaching the shores of the United States. And so we have that passion. We believe in the mission of seeking human rights and social justice for people who have been persecuted or who are fleeing persecution. And that's what motivates us. And that's why we have 2 immigration clinics. And every year we have dozens of students that participate in real life, helping real people. This is not make-believe. This is not just reading about these cases. This is actually rolling up your sleeves. And we invite you to do that to help people who are in need.
Right. And this is just an example of the opportunities that we offer our students, all of our students, LLM and JD students, to get experiential training. They get that in their, they talk about these issues in their classrooms and in their seminars, but actually to be out and actually doing this under the supervision of Professor Hing and Professor Brown. The students do externships. That's another, the new, in various organizations. Professor Hing said, we're almost at the epicenter here on the West Coast with activities and issues in the immigration law fields. And we're very much connected with that. And there are a number of student organizations at the law school for those interested in these issues, like the Student Immigration Law Association, Public Interest Law Foundation, even international law, family law. All of these issues are really important when we're talking about immigration law and immigration issues. So that's another way that the students get to work on these issues. Now, Professor Hing, you started to talk about what some of the alums are doing. Can you talk a little bit more? I mean, because I know that some of my colleagues who were in the human rights law field are now immigration judges.
Absolutely. And in fact, Judge Jeremiah Johnson,
yes,
wasn't he also on your human rights board for a while?
Human Rights Advocates is an international non-governmental organization that a number of us started decades ago when we were at law schools and under Professor Frank C. Newman. Yes, Jeremiah. And then we have a number of alums who are, a number of LLM alums who have boutique law firms specializing on immigration law. And I know you, Professor Hing, why don't you talk some more about it?
Absolutely, yeah. We have so many alum that are doing immigration law that they're too numerous to mention. But I will say also that, for example, an alum from just 3 or 4 years ago, Claudia Lucatero, she is now a government ICE attorney. And I like to think that she adds a little bit of compassion on the other side of the table, because I think that even though they're the equivalent essentially of a prosecutor, we want people who are on that side with a heart. And she epitomizes that. We have alum who are actually asylum officers who basically, they're one step shy of being an immigration judge. They work at the asylum office where they make decisions on whether or not to grant people asylum who are applying for asylum, who may have fled different countries through visitors visas or student visas and are eligible to apply for asylum. So yeah, we definitely have alum that are all over, and it's the one of the wonderful things about University of San Francisco is its alumni network, that you have not just people practicing law, but as Julianne said, who are judges and who work for the government in different capacity. And some of the best events that the law school sponsors is alumni events that is of course open to the LLM students for them to get to know the alum who are at all different levels of the field of practice. And we have people that work in Washington. We have people that work in all the major cities in the United States as well, who are alum doing immigration law and other areas of law. Absolutely.
Right. And one thing we haven't spoken about is what can someone who maybe hasn't taken a bar exam, for example, what types of work can they do?
Well, we have students that are externing, and first of all, when you're a law student in a clinic, you can do anything that an attorney can do as long as you are doing it under the supervision of a clinical faculty member. So as a student, you can practice law in our immigration clinics, in any of the clinics at the law school.
Exactly.
But as a law graduate, you can do the same thing, but you are eligible, and you know the requirements better than me. You can meet the requirements to take the bar exam in different states. And the wonderful thing about immigration law practice is that it's considered a federal practice as opposed to just a state practice. That means that the immigration courts are at the federal level, not at the state level. That means that if you are a member of any bar, any state bar in the United States, you can practice immigration law in any state. So for example, if you pass the New York bar, you will also be admitted to the federal courts in New York, as well as the state courts. Once you're admitted to the federal courts in New York or Colorado or what, you can practice immigration law in San Francisco. You don't have to be a member of the California bar to practice immigration law in California. And so that's I know many immigration lawyers who practice in San Francisco or Los Angeles, and they are members of a state bar outside of California. That's perfectly fine.
And then some can be in the meantime like policy analysts for nonprofits.
There's so many different opportunities that are available for people who have been trained in the immigration field. First of all, there are many nonprofit organizations, non-government NGOs, if you will, in the field that deal with policy advocacy. There's the Migration Policy Institute. There's Mexican American Legal Defense Fund. There's ACLU. They all have policy arms, policy units where you work on drafting laws and regulations. And even in California, organizations like the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, like the National Lawyers Guild, all those organizations have policy units as well, where you can advocate for change and you don't have to be a lawyer. And many people prefer doing that. Many individuals who have gone to law school prefer policy advocacy because they want to have more impact than just one case at a time. And so they want to fight for policy changes that can affect thousands of people rather than just one individual. And we definitely have many alum who are doing policy work as well.
Right. And so I think it's probably time to see if we have any questions, but I think that our participants today can see a wide range of possibilities of working on immigration law issues here at our law school and out in the community, whether or not they actually practice immigration law in firms, or as you just said just now, working in the policy field on immigration issues. And to just see how we are well connected with having Professor Hing, Professor Brown, at the law school with our classes, our seminars, our clinics, both here, and once our students are here and they get their degrees, they're connected with USF forever as alums. And the network that we have, not only here in the Bay Area, but nationally and internationally, in terms of the types of cases that Professor Hing talked about in our alliances. So I see, I think it's time probably to wrap up.
Well, if we do have time for at least one question, and I'll kind of combine two questions that were pre-submitted to us, if that's okay. And because I think I can read between the lines of what the students were asking. But one question was, what do you want students to take away from the clinic? And a second question that we received is, why consider immigration if you're not certain about what kind of area of law you want to practice, or you want to do something else? So I'm going to combine those two. Sure. Because I think they're both getting at the same point. Whether or not you intend to pursue this as a career, and there are great opportunities to do so because of the connections at USF, what are the transferable skills that students should expect to gain from the clinic, and the benefits of doing it, even if it's not their ultimate career choice?
Yeah, those are very good questions. The skills that you learn in the immigration clinic, you can use basically in any field of law that has clients, okay? You learn interviewing skills, you learn organizational skills, you learn writing skills, because you have to usually write a legal brief, and you don't get better supervision or critique than when we're looking over your shoulder and making sure that that legal brief that's a matter of life and death is written properly. And then you get trial preparation skills, because you learn how to do a direct examination. You learn how to cross-examine a government witness. So those are skills, those are courtroom skills, and also office skills in terms of developing client contacts and client interactions that are just completely transferable to virtually any field of law. And so I do think that when somebody's thinking of a clinical experience, one reason why you might want to consider the immigration clinic or the criminal justice clinic or something like that is because you want hands-on experience. You want live experience. You want to have interaction outside of a book, and you just cannot beat real work on behalf of real people, because one of the other things we want you to come away from is that there's a reason to be passionate about the work that you do, and we hope that much of our passion can rub off on you, because a lot of the students, just especially for Professor Brown, when they see how dedicated she is, that it's hard not to be motivated to follow in her footsteps, at least in terms of commitment.
Right, and this is what our LLM students tell us, especially because a number of them have done some immigration work back in their home countries. And so they come here and they take those classes and they participate in those clinics just so that they can see how this operates here in the US. But what Professor Hing is saying, the analytical thinking skills, the critical analysis skill, advocacy, writing, all of those skills. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about the immigration law clinic, the human rights law clinic, or the intellectual property, internet justice clinic, or whatever. These are basic skills that all lawyers and others should have, and coming here as students will help you with that.
Absolutely. I'll throw in my 2 cents for what it's worth, but for LLM students who are here on a 1-year program, every opportunity to get experiential learning under your belt should be taken advantage of, so that if you choose to do optional practical training, you have experiences that you can speak to professionally.
Right. We had an alum here from Germany yesterday, and at the luncheon, we went around the room and each of the students, the current LLM students, talked about the opportunities that they're going to have doing optional practical training when they finish their degrees in May. And a lot of it has to do with networking and doing work in the clinics. So we thank Professor Hing and the others who not only are experts in the classroom and scholars, but in terms of directors of our clinics. And thank you, Professor Hing.
Thank you. And Professor
Of
Hing,
course.
Julianne and I are very chatty people, but I wanted to make sure, is there anything that you wanted to say before we departed today?
No, thank you for the invitation. But for those of you who are listening on us, USF is a great opportunity for you because it's right in the middle of the most exciting city in the world. I know that I'm bragging. Many of you are probably in exciting cities, but you can't engage in a better place institutionally and citywide. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and the slides so that they can.
Oh, yes. Thank you,
yes.
Julianne. I'll put our contact information
right.
up now. And if anybody has any questions, please do feel free. masterlaws@usfca.edu. Email is the best way to reach us. There are multiple people on the team checking the email daily. And if you have any questions, you can also book a one-on-one appointment with us using this link here below. And I can drop that in the chat, but I will go ahead and stop the recording now and let Professor Hing have some time in his day, but I can stick around to answer questions on contacting the team. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.